Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, but I think it is still fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases here in Sweden. I've heard very, very good things about it, and it is a style, and I guess we can say a sub-style as well, that I know these guys can do very, very well. So I'm really curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Always got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review then, we are going to return once again to the wonderful Stigbergets Bryggeri, who are one of the most reviewed breweries here on Rampant Lion Reviews. So this particular beer is called Sugar Ape. It comes in at 10% ABV, and this is a New England Hazy, Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the local Osmoskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for April of 2022, and it is supposed to be a very, very nice one. I can't remember exactly when I reviewed my last New England Triple IPA from these guys, but I think it must have been within the last kind of 6 months or something like that. When it comes to New England Triple IPAs, the one that really sticks in mind from Stigbergets Bryggeri is the Chronic, actually. That was very, very good. But they had a series that they were releasing for a wee while where it was, a black can and then it just had a different colour kind of hop flower on it, actually. So yeah, if you ever come across any of those beers, and I'm sure Stigbergets will kind of re-release them at some point in the future, then those are ones that you definitely want to have a little look at. I think those were all triple IPAs if I remember rightly. But yeah, black can, different kind of coloured hop flower on them, and of course Stigbergets and the writing on the top. They're very, very distinctive. But yeah, the newest triple IPA from Stigbergets in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Stigbergets Bryggeri before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you once again about Stigbergets Bryggeri. So, Stigbergets Bryggeri, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded by Nils Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson. So, these guys owned 2 bars that shared the one kitchen. This is Bar Kino and the Hagabions Cafe, which can be found on Linnegatan in Gothenburg, and they both opened back in 2007. But the building in which these 2 bars are located is actually an independent cinema, and if you want to have a little look at what it's like, you can go and check out my Out and About video, which I believe was filmed in about October of 2019, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly. But I would like to get back there again and actually go and watch a movie at the cinema, because there were lots of really interesting independent foreign and Swedish films on there. But basically, to go back to the story of Stigbergets, originally the idea that they had was to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars, but this led to them kegging the beer and selling it to other pubs, and eventually to bottling the beers beginning in November of 2014. So the original beers that they were brewing were mainly English and German styles, but more recently they started to focus on the American hoppy styles of beer, and this was where they really made their name. So the original head brewer was Ole Andersson, Anderson, who is the co-owner of OO Brewing, and he stayed with the company until I think it was about April of 2017, at which point he went on to focus all of his energies on OO Brewing. He was replaced for a short period of time by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the vice presidents at Three Floyds in Munster in Indiana, just outside of Chicago over in the US. And around this time, they moved to a new brewery at Partihalarna, and it was there that they were brewing 5,000 litre batches at a time. And they began working on some sour beers in that facility as well. But they started selling their beers in these 440 milliliter cans as opposed to the 330 milliliter bottles that they had before. If you want to see what those looked like, you can go back and check out some of my very early Stigbergets reviews. But since they started putting their beers in the cans, they were able to export their beers a lot more widely, and they have become a very well-known name across the European continent now. These days, they have a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown in London, and also Lucas Monroyd, who was known for his time at All In Brewing, one of the numerous gypsy breweries operating in the Gothenburg area. But as of summer 2020, they've moved to a new brewery in Ringen, and they're going to brew some lambic beer there, from what I understand as well. But the idea behind this new facility in Ringen that they have is that it's going to be an experience brewery, and apparently they have the facilities for swimming there as well. So I do need to go and check out this this facility that they have up at Stigbergets in Gothenburg, because it sounds very, very interesting. But they want to basically brand this place as what they call an experience brewery. So definitely something you should go and check out if you find yourself up in Gothenburg. But in April or so of 2020, they opened up a bar in Stockholm, and they've also opened up a folköl shop in Gothenburg as well. And for those of you who don't know, folköl is anything that is 3.5% ABV and below, and that means that it can be sold on the private market rather than having to go through the Systembolaget state monopoly that we have here in Sweden. I believe these guys also now have a restaurant as well, which they'll be opening up soon, so I will add details about that into the next Stigbergets review that I do. But other than that, all I can say is that as of April 2022, these guys have produced 165 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and I think I must have reviewed about half of them actually. I must have reviewed about 75 or 80 different Stigbergets beers for you here on the channel actually. One of the most reviewed breweries that we've had here on Rampant Lion Reviews, of course. But yeah, that is all I can tell you about Stigbergets Bryggeri for the moment. The classic beers from these guys would be the new and improved GBG Beer Week beer, which along with the Amazing Haze, I would say those are two of the four kind of pioneering New England hazy IPAs, along with Narangi from OO Brewing and the New Sweden IPA from Stigbergets Bryggeri. If Brewski, of course, had a regular one, they would certainly be counted within the pioneers of that style here in Sweden. But yeah, if you get the chance to try the Amazing Haze or the new and improved GBG Beer Week, those are some very classic New England IPAs from here in Sweden. But yeah, if you want to learn more about Stigbergets Bryggeri, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So like I mentioned to you earlier, this one is a 10% New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, triple imperial IPA. The hops in this beer are Galaxy, Mosaic, Idaho 7 and Nelson Sauvin. We know all of these hops pretty well. Galaxy from Australia, 14% alpha acid, big passion fruity notes, a lot of mango, sometimes gives you a wee bit of pineapple as well. Mosaic, an American hop, 14% alpha acid, big oily tangerine notes of course. Idaho 7 again, 14% alpha acid and again American. Nice big mango-y notes normally, but a bit of a softer apricot and papaya type side to it. And then Nelson Sauvin is that big 16% beast from New Zealand, and it gives you that big oily white green grapey gooseberry type flavour. So a really interesting hop combination in this one. I think we've probably had it before on the channel. After 3,250 reviews, there is a good chance we've had this exact hop mix, but yeah, it should be good nonetheless. But a 440ml can, I think I paid I want to say that I paid 65 Swedish kronor for this, so that is €6.50 somewhere in the region of £6 sterling, and I guess it might be about $8 American, something like that. But yeah, plain silver top on the can there. It looks very nice. As we said, yeah, 10% New England Hazy IPA. So yeah, not sure what the idea behind the name Sugar Ape is. I couldn't find that out from researching on glass banking or anything like that. But yeah, I think we should just get this guy out and crack on with it then. 10% New England IPA. I'm not sure if this is the strongest one. I'm not sure if some of the other ones like the Chronic and stuff like that have been a little bit stronger. But yeah, I think 10% is the kind of borderline, if you like, when you can say it's a triple IPA rather than a double IPA. I think, you know, sort of 8 to 9.9, I guess we could say, is still a double Imperial IPA. But yeah, anyway, there we go. We've got it out into the glass, and that seems to be nicely lined up, so my OCD is happy. But yeah, let's take a proper look at this beer then and just see how we go. So we've got most of it out and into the glass. Before the head disappears, you can see that this beer has poured with about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy coloured head. You can see that the bubbles on this one are quite nice and small, which is good. But yeah, it's quite an interesting colour, this one. It's a very murky, almost kind of golden colour actually. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks pretty nice. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation. But yeah, it looks good. Yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, it looks like a sort of mixed tropical fruit juice. This one, I always like comparing the New England IPAs to different kinds of fruit juice because that's really just what they remind me of. But yeah, remember the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining the EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. In a New England IPA, the typical wort boil time is 90 minutes. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will also affect the colour of the beer, but normally you don't have to care about that when it comes to New England IPAs. In terms of the level of haziness, murkiness, whatever you want to say with this one, I think it is about what you would expect from a New England triple IPA. The level of haziness in these beers, of course, is down to the oak content, wheat content, and in some cases the yeast as well. This one is leaning toward that soupier, gloopier end of the spectrum. But remember, there isn't a relationship between the level of haze and the alcohol content, of course, or the malt content. It can vary from brewery to brewery and recipe to recipe. But yeah, other than that, it looks pretty nice. Well, saying other than that, it basically meets the bill or fits the bill for a New England triple IPA. This one, I don't think we need to say anything else about the appearance of this one, so we can crack on and take a little look at the aroma. Then let's do this. Ooh, aroma wise, I'm going to say straight away, this one comes across as sort of big and chewy and sweet. You know, the malty side of this one, it's got a bit of breadiness to it. It's definitely got a lot of that kind of Werther's butter candy sort of thing. The green component, I think, is a bit more reserved in this, but you are certainly getting some really nice fruity notes out of it. So that's a basic first impression of it, but let's go into it a little bit more and break down that aroma for you, because I think this is going to be quite an interesting beer actually. Yeah, so yeah, aroma wise, this is pretty interesting. So the backbone of this beer, you do get a little touch of bread crust out of this one. You can feel a little bit, or you can smell a little bit of that kind of fresh hedgehog, tiger roll sort of bread crusty character out of this one. You do get quite a nice big dense white bready character to it, which is great. And you can certainly smell the oats and the wheat thickening out this whole beer. Now I'll say the wheat comes across as being a little bit, as being mainly smooth, but you do get a little bit of a wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose, but I get a lot of oaty character out of this one. And that's really interesting. For me, this beer, it's big and bready. As I've always said to you, for me there's 6 different elements you need to think about with a New England IPA. You get the farmhousey kind of yeasty character, the sort of rye leaning grady side of things, and those are a bit more prevalent in American brewed New England IPAs. But then you get the oaty creaminess, the wheaty bitiness, the barley malt bread, and also a little bit of sweetness. And I would say those are more common. Those are a bit more common in the those are a wee bit more common in the European ones. Of course, I think most of the New England IPAs that came to Europe were based on the sort of Trillium oaty ones and the Trillium wheaty ones and the Treehouse kind of creamy sort of things. So this beer strikes me as being a little bit more of like a Treehouse type beer. It strikes me as being very oaty and creamy, but you certainly do get a wee bit of that wheaty note to it as well. So yeah, for me, a little bit of that wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose, but a lovely big kind of oaty, creamy sort of thing to it as well. But as I said earlier, this beer does have a certain degree of sweetness to it. I'm getting a lot of kind of Werther's Original, butter candy, butterscotchy type notes out of this, and the more that I smell of it, the more that side of things starts to grow. So yeah, that's quite interesting for sure. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the malty side of the beer. Green component wise, I'm getting a little bit of a kind of earthiness out of it, and that's going to be the mosaic that's giving you that, but it's quite a smooth earthiness, I would say. But the green component for me, it's quite a bright floral and grassy note that you're getting out of this one. So nice bright floral aromaticity, some light kind of slightly zesty grassy characters, but yeah, other than that, I don't think there's too much to report on the green component. The green component is actually quite reserved in this one, I have to say. So yeah, on the fruity side of the beer, yeah, for me, the I think that it's actually quite a soft tropical note you get out of this. So you can certainly smell a wee bit of the kind of, you can smell the Nelson Sauvin in this one, that white, green, grapey, gooseberry sort of thing. That's forming the backbone of the beer. Absolutely. I don't get too much of the kind of more pungent passion fruit that I would have expected from the Galaxy. I'm not getting so much of that out of this beer. But I'm certainly getting a good little bit of a smooth but still juicy mango-y character. Absolutely. And that's going to come both from the Galaxy and the Idaho 7. So yeah, I do get a bit of I get that big oily gooseberry, white green grapey note. I also get that I do also get that nice kind of, yeah, I get that big sort of mango-y character to it. And I also get that I do get a wee bit of an apricot, in fairness. I get a little bit of apricot out of it, but I'm getting some nice big juicy tangerine qualities from the mosaic as well. I think the more that I smell of it, the more of the mosaic I start to get. Yeah, definitely Nelson Sauvin with that big white green grapey gooseberry backbone, some oily tangerine notes in there, and you also have that kind of big juicy mango-y note and some apricot-y characters in there too. It's a really nice smelling beer, actually. It goes together very, very well. I don't know if there's anything else we really need to say about this one, but it gives you everything you would kind of want from a New England Triple IPA. I'm going to take a little quick look at the hops again on this one. So Galaxy, Mosaic, Idaho 7 and Nelson Sauvin. Yeah, I think it's kind of given you what you would expect from those 4 hops, to be honest with you. But yeah, as I always say, take a bit of time just to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we go. So this is the Sugar Ape 10% New England Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg up on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. That's quite interesting. I'm going to say straight away, this is just a big beast of a beer, actually. Big, heavy, silky, smooth, creamy sort of thing. I need a few sips of this to kind of get my head around it, to be honest with you. Yeah. First impression of this one is, to me, it comes across as quite oaty and creamy and sort of silky smooth. But underneath that, it does have a wee bit of a kind of brown bready, slightly grainy character, which is interesting. The green component is quite, the green component is quite smooth. It has a wee bit of that. It has a wee bit of depth to it as well, and you've got a nice big oily, fruity sort of thing. Now the question that would be going through my head is this as good as some of the other New England triple IPAs I've had from Stigbergets? I'm tempted to say not quite. I don't think this is quite as good as the Chronic or the other ones that we've had in the black cans with the hop flowers. I forget the names. I think we've had a blue one, a red one, and a green one at different stages. But yeah, I don't think this one is quite as good as those ones that we've had previously, to be honest. It's a solid beer, but it just doesn't strike me as much as those ones did. But I have to remember that I am drinking this one toward the end of April, and this beer was released about 3 weeks ago. I think it was the 7th of April that they released these beers. This one was released about 3 weeks ago through Systembolaget, and I think it was on like Glassbanken and Kiosk and things like that a few weeks before it, so I'm not sure exactly how old this is, so there might be a wee bit of kind of freshness things to it, but in fairness, when it's 10%, I think that protects it a little bit, but also you don't feel too much of that. You don't feel that slightly oaty dryness that you can get from some of the lower ABV New England IPAs, and this one, it still has that big smoothness to it. But yeah, it works. It does work, this one. It's nice, but as I say, it just doesn't strike me in the same way as the likes of the Chronic and stuff like that did. So yeah, need to bear that in mind with this one. But let's go through it and break it down in the way that we always do with these beers. When I think about it though, it's been a good while since I've had a New England triple, actually. I don't know, it might have been an Overtone one. Might have been the Broken Clouds from them, actually, was the last one that I had. So yeah, food for thought, definitely food for thought. Anyway, let's break this down for you a little bit then. We'll start on that middle third of the palate. So backbone of the beer, you definitely get a little bit of that kind of hedgehog, kind of tiger roll sort of bread crusty note there. On top of that, there's definitely a bit of a kind of dense fresh white bread in there, but in fairness, the further you go into the aftertaste for this one, the bread becomes a little bit more sort of wholemeally, like a kind of brown bread sort of thing, and I'm almost getting that. I'm almost getting a little bit of a slightly porridgey vibe with this beer as well. You get a lot of oatiness out of this beer the more that you drink of it. So yeah, bread crust, absolutely, kind of white wholemeal bready layer, but then a bit of an on top of that, you can feel there's a little bit of a kind of wheaty bitey note, like a thin wheaty bitey layer, but then on top of that you're getting the oatiness. And the oaty side of this beer for me is interesting because it's almost like you've got a kind of layer of porridgey type flavour to this one, but then on top of that you've got a smoother and slightly sweet oat layer coming out of the beer too. So yeah. And in fairness, what I'll say about this beer is that the malt base, the more that you drink of it, the malt base does sweeten up. But I would stick with that. As I said, you've got a kind of bread crusty base, like a sort of wholemeal brown bready layer. You can feel a little bit of wheat sitting on top of that with just a little touch of bite to it. Then you've got a slightly wet, oaty, kind of porridgey layer. Then on top of that, you've got that smoother, sweet oaty note. So in that sweeter oaty layer, you've got a nice kind of circle of, you do have a little bit of that, you've got that nice kind of circle of sweet oaty character in there, which I really do like. So that sweet, smooth oaty sort of thing. As you move out towards the very extremities of the palate, you will get a little more of a slightly drier oaty character out of the beer, which is also quite interesting. But then in the dead centre of your palate, there's a smaller circle there, which is like a sort of concentrated, kind of brown sugary sort of thing. And that's the booziness of the beer. At 10% ABV, you would always expect a New England triple IPA to show you a little bit of its kind of brown sugary side. So yeah, on top of that kind of smoother oaty layer, there is definitely a circle of kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. So yeah, this is quite an interesting one. The thing that makes this beer quite unique for me is that sort of porridgey, wet oaty kind of layer that you get to this beer, and a bit of the brown bready kind of vibe as well. So yeah, this beer certainly gives you things to think about, but I think we've covered the middle third of the palate as much as we need to in this one. So let's go on to the back third of the palate then. The border region between middle and back third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up there. You've got a wee bit of that kind of porridgey thing going on. But then the base of the back third of your palate, you can feel there's a wee bit more of that grainy bread crusty sort of thing. It's a little bit more bitter and grainy toward the back of the palate, as we've said. You get a slightly taller layer of that brown bready, wholemeal bready sort of thing. And then on top of that, you can feel the wheaty layer. And I think the wheat's got a bit more bite to it on the back third of the palate. On top of all of that, you get that nice kind of yeasty, you get that nice kind of more dense yeasty sort of layer to it as well. So the yeasty side of this beer for me, let's just focus on that. So on top of the oaty layer, or on top of the wheaty layer, I should say, sorry, you get like a dense white bready sort of thing. It's got a wee bit of a woody, crackery note to it, and yeah, as I say, I do like how that all pieces together. So you get that, yeah, that big, dense, doughy, yeasty sort of character to it. It has a wee bit of that grainy bread crusty edge to it as well, which is interesting. So you do get a wee bit of dryness, I think, from the yeast in this beer. But yeah, the further you go into the aftertaste with this, you do get the oatiness. The middle third of your palate is definitely more oaty leaning, and it has that bit of porridgey character to it. But then the back third of your palate's a wee bit more yeasty, and it also has that kind of wheaty bite. So it's a really interesting proposition, this beer, I have to say. I do like how this one, it certainly gives you a wee bit of diversity, that's for sure. There's a few interesting things going on in this one. So yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour of the malty and yeasty side of the beer. But back third of the palate is definitely taller in terms of flavour, but as you go into the middle third of your palate, it kind of squashes down together a little bit more, and you get a wee bit more kind of you get a wee bit of a more kind of densified flavour to it as well. So yeah, I like how that goes together, absolutely. Yeah, it works really nicely on this one. So let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer. So, green component then. Back corners of the palate, there's definitely a nice wee bit of earthiness to this one. That's going to be Mosaic that gives you that. But as you move further forward along the sides of the palate, you do get a little bit of that deeper floral aromatic sort of thing to this one. But it gives you a little bit of oiliness as well. I think this beer is mainly relying on late addition and dry hopping, to be honest with you. Early addition hopping is used mainly in West Coast IPAs. It gives you a lot of bitterness. Late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil is used in West Coast and New England's, but that gives you a little bit of bitterness and mainly kind of flavour and aroma. But then the dry hopping gives you a lot of it gives you pretty much all flavour and aroma, and I think this one probably is relying a little bit on late addition hopping and dry hopping. It doesn't have too deep a green component. You get a bit of floral aromaticity there, quite an oily floral aromaticity, and round the front curve of the palate it is a little bit lighter and sort of grassy in a way, I would say. But yeah, it's interesting for sure. The grassiness that you get out of this one is quite a wet grassiness too, but let's focus on that front third of your palate and the fruity side of things. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of that bready build up again, you get a wee bit of that oaty porridgey sort of thing. Then the base of the front third of your palate is a more kind of smooth oaty type thing. So yeah, smooth oaty character for sure. But yeah, on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. And across that front third of your palate, you can just feel that, you can feel the Nelson Sauvin kind of giving you the base of the beer. It's got that white, green, grapey note toward the back half of the front third of your palate. As you come further forward, it gets a little bit more oily and gooseberry-like, and you can feel the other hops sitting on top of that, the Galaxy, the Idaho 7, and the Mosaic in there. So toward the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of that stronger passion fruit from the Galaxy, but as you move toward the kind of middle of that front third of your palate, you get a big, juicy, quite ripe mangoey note out of that. And as I say, that's a mix of the Galaxy. That's a mix of the Galaxy and the Idaho 7. Absolutely, you get a mix of that in this one. But then as you move forward in the beer, you might get a little touch of apricot just underpinning all of that incidentally as well. But as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate on this one, that's when you start to get the tangerine orange from the. That's when you start to get the tangerine orange from the Mosaic in this one. So that's really interesting too. Yeah, you get that nice big, tangerine Mosaic note from tangerine orangey Mosaic-y character out of this beer as well. But yeah, definitely a big oily fruity note to this one. I think the fruitiness in this beer is really, really nice actually. The only thing that I would question is it's a solid beer, this one, but as I say, it just doesn't strike me in the same way that some of the other New England triple IPAs have. And I do wonder if that is a little bit to do with the freshness. To be honest with you, that's one of the downsides of the Systembolaget system here in Sweden, unfortunately. Some of these beers will sit in the warehouse a little bit before they actually get out and onto the shelf, which is a terrible shame. But a solid enough New England triple IPA, but just doesn't strike me as much as some of the previous efforts have. So yeah, interesting, certainly interesting. But yeah, I think we can move on and round off, pardon me, with a little look at the mouthfeel of this one then. So, yeah, overall I would say that this beer is, I'd say that it's full-bodied. I think it's kind of in the middle of that full-bodied range. Yeah, so full-bodied, carbonation is quite smooth. It has a real slickness to it, this one as well, which I think is really, really good. So yeah, nice big kind of slickness to it. I think in terms of IBUs and stuff like that, I think this beer is a sort of 40 or 50 IBU beer. It doesn't feel overly bitter, but it's got a good little bit of, it does have a nice little bit of bitterness to it, in fairness too. Yeah, the malty side of things, lovely and smooth, big and creamy. I do like how that goes together. It does have a degree of sweetness to it as well, and the fruity side of things, big and oily, and quite well balanced between the more. It's got a good bit of citrusy character and a bit of tropical, but then you've got that kind of Nelson Sauvin oiliness just balancing it out. It's a solid beer, as I say, but I think I've had better triple IPAs from Stigbergets. I think that's my honest opinion. Yeah, the Chronic and stuff like that was just a little bit more striking than this one. But yeah, the Sugar Ape is definitely nice, and it's worth checking out if you get the chance. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. So yeah, this was the Sugar Ape, a 10% New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg on the west coast of Sweden. Yeah, awesome. Very nice to return to these guys after what feels like a little while, but as I said, one of the most reviewed breweries here on Rampant Lion Reviews. But again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets Bryggeri as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until the next time, Slange just now. Check out my social media, check out Stigbergets' social media, and I'll catch you guys on the next review. Slange, Skull, cheers, see you very, very soon.